All right, recording in progress. Welcome everyone to another episode of whatever this is, where Theater Crude examines things happening in Oklahoma City, performance art-wise, theater-wise. I am joined today with Don Russell. He is a professor down at Oklahoma City Community College. This past weekend, I went and saw their production of The Bald Soprano, which Don directed. I had a great time. So if you don't mind, Don, let's just start talking about Bald Soprano.
Sure. Is there anything in particular you want to start out with?
Well, I guess I should let people know it's no longer running. It ran for one weekend, so your opportunity to see it is gone. But that is the positive and negative of this weird format that I'm trying, and that this isn't a promotional tool for the things that I'm talking to the guest about. It's a chance for me to dissect a thing that I saw that our guest has produced.
I like that.
So we don't have to worry about spoilers. We just get to dig in and talk about it. So absurdism.
Yeah.
Theater of the absurd.
Yeah, it's Theater of the Absurd. Bald Soprano is Theater of the Absurd. So what that essentially means, it's examining the absurdity of our human existence is how you could kind of distill it down to. But it often deals with the way in which we interact with each other and things like that. It's also oftentimes cyclical in nature, so we often find ourselves back where we began, and that is pretty much how life sort of progresses for us in the real world too, I find. It's that whole thing of life being cyclical and history repeating itself and all that fun stuff. I think the absurdists, the ones that were writing in Theater of the Absurd and continue to write in Theater of the Absurd, I think that's something that they recognized and honed in on. Another aspect of theater of the absurd that you often find is there tends to be a lot of silence. There tends to be a lot of downtime where something's happening, but nobody's quite sure what. There's not necessarily dialogue or monologuing happening at those moments. Now, Ionesco, the playwright for Bald Soprano, definitely put a lot of those moments in. Now, what we did at our production, we did take some liberties with Ionesco's script. We truncated a lot of the large pauses down to shorter pauses. And in the play, there's this clock in the background, always ticking in the background, which is really great for the silent moments because the play is about two couples, one couple coming to visit another couple, and then the party's crashed by the local fire chief and the one couple's maid. But in those early scenes where the evening just begins for these two couples, there's this really beautiful scene where all four of them are just sitting there in silence and all you can hear is the ticking of the clock. It feels very true to life in a lot of ways. But part of it was the clock is almost a character in itself, and its chimes tend to be responding a lot to what's going on stage. Now, Ionesco had put in a lot of chimes. So there was a lot of time in the original script where the audience is just sitting there listening to clock chimes while the actors are doing nothing on stage. So we played with that, and there was a lot of fun that could be had with that, but we feared the pacing of the piece being dragged down too much. So we shortened a lot of those chimes. So for instance, in one case, there's something like 27 or 29 chimes or something crazy like that. And we brought them down to, I think I brought it down to 3 chimes. So I really severely cut that. And then at the end, we cut a few lines for sake of the pacing of the last scene. We took the last scene, which is supposed to sort of break down into a chaotic everyone speaking at the same time, and we made it very stylized. So we injected a lot of movement into the scene to sort of represent the anarchy, or not anarchy, but the I don't know. I find when I'm at a dinner party or something and it's awkward and all I want to do is leave, my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute and just like frantically trying to get away. And that's sort of what that last scene was representing to us. So there was a lot of chaos, a lot of frustration, a lot of talking at each other, not to each other, nobody listening. And we wanted to embody that in the movement. And then we injected a good bit of lurid lighting, one could say. We took big inspiration off of one of David Lynch's short films called The Rabbits, which is pure torture, if you ever want to watch it, in the most beautiful way. It's a really funky, stylized piece that we felt matched what we were trying to say with Bald Soprano.
Yeah, that ending was it was great to see a dinner party that not only was full of all the nonsense that one is accustomed to, of the small talk and you're pretending to have a connection with the people around you, but for whatever reason it's not working. You get to the end of that party and it feels like a failure. Like you mentioned how your brain is thinking about anywhere to be anywhere other than there. My reaction is usually I get to the end of the dinner party and I am just shouting at myself of, how did you let this go so horribly? Get out of here as quick as you can.
Yeah.
So I was really digging into that part of it when it just went stylized. There's a bright red light on one side and bright green on the other, and everyone was running around. It's like, yep, this is my exit velocity that I'm trying to get, because I need to get out because this did not go well.
Yeah, and there's a beautiful moment that almost ends the piece where the lady of the house that everybody is visiting, she starts just repeating choot, 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 like a train, and she is driving the other couple out of her house, like a locomotive, just barreling toward them until they're at the door. And then there's a brief exchange, and then they're out the door, and everything returns to the position it was at the beginning of the play. So we have our cyclical nature where it ends where it began.
Yeah, and it leaves you with that impression of we never learn from our mistakes. We're just going to have the same day. We're going to have the same horrible dinner party, and we'll just keep doing that until we die.
Yep. And that is truly the absurdity of our lives.
Yeah, I wish that more absurdity was presented in Oklahoma City, but unfortunately, it seems like it is just too. Its absurdity makes it too true, if that makes any sense.
It did. Everybody I talked to after the show identified with the way in which the small talk was, the surface level conversation was depicted. They identified with it in a very real and fundamental way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the desire for a story from the fire chief. Oh, this is somebody interesting. He'll have something interesting to say, and he also just had nothing interesting to say, even though everyone constantly like, just tell us something.
Yeah, like the big moment of the evening was when one of the visitors told a story about a man tying his shoelace, and everybody was very excited by this fascinating story.
Yeah. Speaking of stories, the puppets, was that an Ionesco thing, or you guys come up with that one yourself?
I think we came up with that one ourselves. One of the actors was like, "I'd really love to do puppets here," and I was actually like, so early on in the rehearsal process, I tried to give a lot of freedom for creativity and ideas to be generated. So we had all kinds of crazy there was nothing that was too crazy to consider. And then throughout the process, we then started peeling back those things, just kind of like getting a little bit more grounded with each choice. But one of the things that one of the actors brought up was the idea of telling that story with puppets, a snake and a fox puppet. And that actually, luckily, got stuck. That one stuck. So we kept that one in, and it turned out really great. And it's just this crazy story about a snake and a fox interacting over borrowing money, which is, again, absurd. But the puppets act out the story that one of the people at the dinner party is telling. Really fun moment.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, again, just that nobody acknowledged that the puppets were happening, that they had happened, that they existed at all. It was just part of the story. And then we went back to sitting around the table.
Yep.
So in your directing process, is this mostly the freedom to let everybody explore whatever ideas they want to bring to the table? Is that just an approach you use for absurdity, or do you really like to use that in other genres as well?
It's to the degree that I used it this time is for absurdity. So just generating as many ideas as possible to pick and choose from. But normally, what I'll do is I'll create a nice solid structure and then give the actors complete freedom within that structure. So we'll spend the first couple of weeks doing the blocking and figuring out the concept of the piece and how the text is being engaged with the various actors. And then once that is done, once we have the basic framework up, then it's time to play within those parameters. And I do that because personally, when I'm acting as an actor, I like to have very clearly delineated lines. Like these are the borders of where you can play. And I feel like that frees me up to completely try anything I want so long as it's within that structure. It's almost like I can do anything just so long as I don't go past that barrier that is very clear and I know exactly where it's at.
Yeah, I appreciate that framework as well.
Yeah.
I know that's a big thing that Jenny, other founding member of Theatre Crude, who is never on any of these videos, never wants to be the public face. So you got me. Her passion is taking a strict set of rules and seeing how creative a person can be with that. So that is part of what led us to this Fringe Festival model with Theatre Crude, is that we really there are a lot of creative people in Oklahoma City. And if we tell them you only have this much time, you only have this much space, you can only bring this many things, show us how creative you can be in that tiny space. It has bred a lot of really great storytelling over the years.
Yeah, I got to see a few shows this past year, and then the initial Theatre Crude year, 2019, I believe that was, right?
Yeah.
In October. I got to see a lot of really wonderful work at both of those festivals. Just seeing, I'm new to Oklahoma City. I got here August of 2019, so to have in October of 2019 a fringe festival, a local fringe festival to be able to go to and see what kind of work is being done in Oklahoma City on the fringes, which is where I like to operate. It was really wonderful to be able to see all the different artists and the way in which they are creative.
Yeah, you have a past with fringe festivals, right? Milwaukee.
I do.
Fringe?
Yeah, so I'm pretty deeply connected with the Milwaukee Fringe Festival. I sit on their committee, even remotely now that I'm in Oklahoma City. I've done that for several years now. And then my dear friend Kelly up in Milwaukee, she and I tend to MC the event. So we'll do the curtain speech for basically every show that we can. They tend to do it over multiple days, and some shows overlap. They have two stages going at the same time. So sometimes we can't get to all of them. But we try and get to as many of the shows as possible to announce them. But also I've performed in the Milwaukee Fringe Festival, and I've brought two shows that I've directed to the Milwaukee Fringe Festival, as well as the Chicago Fringe Festival. So the work I do is very fringe. The original work that I do is very fringe. So fringe festivals are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about anything you're currently working on? Do you have a project in the work?
I do have a personal project that I'm working on with Kelly, who I just mentioned. I actually, you may not have seen it yet, but I have submitted to the Theatre Crude Fringe Festival, and I'm intending to submit it to the Milwaukee Fringe Festival. Now, Kelly's in Milwaukee, and I'm in Oklahoma City, so we're collaborating also with a choreographer, Andrea Burkholder, wonderful choreographer. She's in Milwaukee as well, and the three of us are collaborating on this project. It's called Dreams of Drowning, and it's sort of not sort of, it really is. It's a surrealist exploration of an individual's grieving process. So the process of grief, what does that look like? And it's set in a dream world. So essentially it's this person dreaming, but there's two characters, one of the deceased, one of the bereaved. Is that the right word, bereaved? Yeah. And the only text is poetry, but the story is really told through dance. And it's sort of, the poetry represents various memories and moments and stories that the two characters have had throughout their relationship before the one died. And then the dance pieces actually are, the idea is for those to represent the stages of this individual's processing of grief. So not the stages of grief as defined in psychology, but how this person's grieving experience progressed. You know, the moment right after death, sometime after death, and missing the person, wanting to be with the person in death, and then eventually sort of like the reawakening of wanting to remain in this world and experience this world again, and then ultimately with a hopeful ending of coming back to life, the person mourning coming back to life, because when you lose someone, it's almost like you have died with them, or at least a major part of you has died with them. So there needs to be a rebirth before you can really move past the grieving period, which never truly ends.
Yeah. Is this again the type of work where you have set up a framework that you are trying to work out of as you choreograph this movement?
Yeah, so in the script, the way a lot of my work, so the basic structure of my original work is there will be text, and then at some point we'll reach a moment where the concepts become ineffable, too big for words. So in those moments, we represent that with movement in some manner. So that's essentially how I tend to work. But the framework for this one is with the dance pieces. So there's 5 dance pieces, and they are the pieces that actually tell the story. And then the poetry is just to support the dance pieces. So with the poetry, it gives us the moments of dance. And with the dance, if you look at the scripts that I write, they have detailed explanation. They'll have a title that represents, almost like Brett used to do this, a title that represents that particular scene or whatever, that encapsulates the whole concept of it. So I'll title each dance piece, and then I'll have a detailed description about what it's representing. And then that way a choreographer can read the script and get a glimpse of what I'm picturing in my mind conceptually. And then they can find ways to tell that story through the body rather than through verbal communication. It's intended to be very surreal, and it's intended to be vague enough that, and this is something that I do with all of my work, whether it's something that an original piece or if I'm directing a traditional script, I like to leave enough ambiguity so that the audience can fill in those blanks with their own personal experience. That way they have a very personal connection to what they're witnessing or partaking in on stage, because I think the audience has a role to play in all theatrical productions.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to, I am curious. I frequently hear this, that people like to leave that little layer of ambiguity so the audience can then place themselves into whatever story they're seeing. And I have had enough conversations with other people who have seen the same things that I have, that I am not entirely convinced that the ambiguity needs to be left. People are going to place their own lives on top of a story, no matter what it is or who it is.
I agree with that.
So sometimes I wonder, is the layer of ambiguity necessary? I mean, it's nice, but is it necessary in getting an audience engaged with a story?
I don't think it is. I mean, we have the term suspension of disbelief just for that reason. So I don't think that ambiguity is necessary. It's just a means by which that I like to engage the audience. But I work very abstractly. Back when I was in Milwaukee, I created several pieces with Kelly, and I used to consider the work we did neo-symbolism. So it's symbolist style work, but not in the traditional sense. So we would approach large concepts and ideas, big philosophical conversations with the audience, but we would point toward that rather than spelling it out for the audience. We pointed toward big ideas, because ideas like some ideas are just too big to be able to put into clear words without having some massive treaty on paper, right? So if you have, and I like to keep my projects around an hour in length. So if you have an hour to approach the concept of grief, or approach the concept of a reality, is this reality, or is this non-reality that we are existing in? Big concepts. How do you approach those big concepts in an hour with a play? Very difficult to do unless you do it in a way that just points toward these ideas and allow the audience to then fill in all those blanks.
Yeah, at that point, it almost feels like you are just presenting the introduction to a play that the audience is going to finish on their own time later.
Yeah, the biggest compliment anybody can get for doing theater, in my opinion, is when an audience member approaches me afterwards and says, yeah, I was there with so-and-so and so-and-so, and the whole ride home, we just kept talking about it. We just kept talking about what we thought it was, where we saw ourselves in it, what our take on it was, and having debate about what it actually was. And then another favorite thing of mine to do is, after a show, if an audience member comes up to one of my more abstract pieces and is like, so I think I know what it was about, but what was it about? And at that point I say, no, I need to hear what you thought it was about first. I'm more interested in that, because I'm not concerned about the audience understanding what I'm wrestling with. I'm interested in the audience sharing in that struggle of experiencing what it is to be a human being.
It's where that line of good versus bad starts to break down for me, because as long as it's interesting and I want to keep talking about it, it starts to veer into that, well, then it was worth it, so it must have been good, even if the thing that I'm talking about and can't stop talking about is how it was flawed.
Yeah.
Which seems bad to say. It's like, I want to see flawed things because it's more interesting to figure out why that didn't work, and why did you make this choice, and why didn't it land with me specifically. But then again, the opposite is also true. Somebody makes a great choice and I just can't stop thinking about, that was a great choice. And like the laugh track that you had inserted into Bald Soprano, when new characters come in the door and this laugh track would play, and it's just like, I liked that so much. It spoke volumes to what had just happened in a way that, yeah, the cultural dialogue that we have about what a laugh track means,
right,
all just summed up in just the inclusion of a laugh track. It was great. I've lost the thread. I just started saying words. Audience reactions to things, if they can be talking about what they've seen. Yeah, I'm right with you. That is a great thing.
Yeah, that's the goal, right?
Yeah. Have you seen anything recently that you just can't seem to stop thinking about, talking about?
Not really, because I've been so engrossed in working on the Bald Soprano that I haven't had a chance to really get out much. I did just recently, a couple of months ago, I was lucky enough to see one of my former students was in, which one was it? It was one of the August Wilson pieces. Gem of the Ocean, thank you. Yeah, just Gem of the Ocean. Really beautiful piece. They did it in this really nice small space in a thrust format, so the audience was involved, like right there in the living room as the piece was unfolding. Really beautiful piece. And now I'm looking forward to that same former student of mine, Michael is his name. He's in the Amen Corner, which is going up pretty soon at Jewel Box. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And it's being directed by another person that was in Gem of the Ocean. So I'm really excited to see what they do with that piece.
All
Actually
right.
kind of bad at that. I tend to have projects lined up. I'm currently working on 3 projects, so it's like I just got approval for the 23-24 season here. So it's like I'm working 2 years in advance. I'm working on multiple projects because one of my big fears is post-show blues. Show closes, and then it's like you get an emotional crash because you've been in this community and you are all working so hard to lift this work into being, creating this thing, birthing this piece of theater, and then all of a sudden it's done, set's gone, costumes are put away, actors are scattered, technicians are scattered, and it's just like suddenly that community has sort of spread out a bit, and it's very easy to slip into a little melancholy as a result. So I like to have things lined up so that I have something else to be focusing on, a new project.
All right. So it's not the school that is imposing this strict, you need to be planning multiple years in advance kind of schedule.
No, actually, I think my bosses are a little taken back by how far in advance I'm trying to plan, because I have to get approval for things from them, and they're working on other things that are like immediate. And suddenly their theater professor's like, oh, and by the way, I know you approved this coming season, but I'd like you to approve the following one as well. But they've been really wonderful about that.
Yeah. What have been previous productions that you've done? I know you've got Hedda Gabler coming up next.
Hedda Gabler's coming up in November.
But
And then following that, we're going to do Rossum's Universal Robots. So we're going to do a sci-fi piece
all
in the
right.
spring of 2023. And it's this really great play. I think the playwright is Serbian, if I'm not mistaken. It was written in 1920, and it is where the word robot comes from.
Very cool. What did you have going on previous? I know that there was a lot of shifting that happened because of COVID restrictions. So did you do any of the virtual productions or radio plays that a lot of people
We
eased
did
into?
one virtually. So when I first got here, it was, like I said, August 2019. So that fall, I did an adaptation of Chekhov's Seagull. So it was streamlined and stripped way down. We followed just one central storyline, and a lot of the larger chunks of text were chopped up, and then several movement pieces were injected into it, and the casting was done representatively. So we didn't stick to gender roles. We stuck to personality types. So we had several women playing men, including Constantine. The principal character was a woman playing Constantine, and we had one man playing a woman, and we played them straight. Like, so if you're a woman playing a man, you're playing a man, but we're not hiding the fact that you're a woman. If you're a man playing a woman, you're playing a woman. The character is a woman, but we're not hiding the fact that you're a man. So it's not like the women aren't lowering their voice and the men aren't raising their voice to a higher pitch. They're just acting. They're telling the story as those characters. So that was a really fun way to sort of start my time here. So then the idea was, right after that, in the spring, we were going to do 12th Night, and then COVID hit. So we were almost ready to open when COVID hit, and we had to shut everything down. So that was very frustrating. The show was just about ready. And then we canceled it. And then in the fall, I got permission to remount it. So we got a second chance to do 12th Night. But the stipulation was it had to live stream. We weren't allowed to have a live audience. So that was the one time we live streamed. The actors were in mask. The masks were, matched their costume and all that fun stuff. And it actually kind of helped us because it made the twins look even more like twins whenever they're wearing a mask and a wig. And then after 12th Night, that ended up being in the fall. So in the spring, we did Murder on the Orient Express. And that was our first one with a live audience back. Now we social distanced our audience, and we required masks, and all of the actors were in masks for that one as well. But it was a really fun show. Agatha Christie murder on the Orient Express, classic murder mystery. It was a lot of fun. But that was the last show that we had a lot of regulation over. So after that, we did an adaptation of Antigone, and that one was without mask. But Antigone was a great show because we had this large cast, and we had a local musician, Jamal Williams, an alum of OCCC. He wrote all this original music that the actors learned how to play while doing choreography from a wonderful choreographer, Renita Fernandes. And to watch the actors not only speak in chorus, but to play live music while dancing, I was so thoroughly impressed with the performers for their ability to juggle all of those things to the highest skill level they could, which was really wonderful to watch.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I have witnessed and been a part of a couple of attempts to achieve that, turning the chorus into a singing chorus, converting this tragedy into an opera or modern musical style with varying degrees of success.
Yeah.
But part of me loves that play just seems to be screaming out for that kind of interpretation, that it keeps happening and people keep trying. And now I'm sorry that I missed it, because I would have loved.
I am too. It was one of my it's one of my favorite productions that we've done here. It was a passion project of mine. I'd wanted to do for almost a decade and never got around to it. So when they gave me a little bit of freedom here, I put it on the docket and brought it to life. It was wonderful to watch. Well, the artist brought it to life. I just stood back and pointed at things and said yes and no.
Yeah. No, and Jamal Williams, he's great. Way back in the day, I used to work part-time at OCCC, and I got to mix one of his live concerts, which was really fun.
That's cool.
So, yeah, I'm glad to hear he's still making music.
Yeah, incredible too. It was just the work he did and the way he was able to teach the music to the actors. It just blew my mind. Like, he and I have completely different approaches on how to work with actors, and it just he would get the actors, and for about 30 minutes they would talk about the rhythms and the beats and the whatever, and then all of a sudden the actors were playing the music. It was just amazing to watch.
For the sake of not taking up everyone's time for too long, I don't know if people have tuned out by now or not. I mean, YouTube's got analytics, but I choose to never look at them. Do you have any other thoughts, things you want to share with the internet?
No, I'm just I'm glad that you're doing these sort of conversations. I think it's really a beautiful idea. Oftentimes live theater gets sort of pushed off to the side and forgotten about, and especially fringe style live performance. So it's really wonderful that you're doing this. And it's also, I just absolutely love that you're doing a fringe festival here. Is fantastic as well. So a lot of gratitude on this side for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Part of me worries that this is just the millennial side of me coming out, feeling like if I have a conversation, it needs to be on the internet. Otherwise, it didn't happen.
No, I think it's good.
All right, cool. Appreciate it. So if we have nothing else, I need to do the obligatory end credit stuff where I talk about Theater Crude Fringe Festival. Applications are open right now. You can go to theatercrude.org and a pop-up will appear, whether you want it to or not, that says apply to our festival. Just click on that button that pops up. If it doesn't pop up, you can go to Get Involved, and that's where all the information is. Those applications are open until late May. May 23rd, I believe, is the deadline. Yeah, the more the merrier. The more people we can get to apply, the more diverse stories we can tell, the more interesting perspectives we can get. So if you're watching this and you're excited, please apply. It's great.
I'd recommend it.
Yeah, also, hopefully it's a good time. Don, you participated last year with Something in the Loss of Leaves, and we hope we took good care of you and that you enjoyed it. Great. More praise from Don.
Yeah, it was a great experience. So I highly recommend applying. I mean, clearly I applied again this year, so it must have been a good experience.
Yeah, that's great. Last thing, Theatre Crude is doing a fundraiser on April 26th. It is called Theatre Crude's Unconventional Shorts. We are presenting some brand new short plays written by some local playwrights. It's going to be great. We have no idea what it's going to be. We've collected the playwrights. We've given them a prompt. They have the next 2 weeks to write them, and we will see them for the first time ever on April 26th. So for a grand total of a $5 suggested donation, you can see some brand new, who knows, off the wall, fringy theater in Oklahoma City.
That's super cool.
And all those proceeds go towards making sure the festival can happen, paying our bills.
Nice.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Great, thank you as well. So good talking to you. We'll do it again sometime.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Have a beautiful rest of your day, sir.
Thanks. You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.